So today we're going to talk about the progressive movement, and progressive comes from the word progress, and it stands for social progress that's going to occur during the 1890s to about the 1920s. And the progressive movement was a movement that came out of the need to solve some of the problems that are occurring in overcrowded cities. The middle class and the lower class workers are paying really high taxes to the government officials, and they're not seeing the benefits. So the progressive movement looked at these growing inner cities full of poverty and crime and corruption and saw it as their responsibility to help get these people out of the poverty. They also believed it was the government's job to help these people. That is the government's role to make sure that everyone has equal access to protect these people from harmful corporations. So during the progressive movement, we're also going to see an increase in government involvement. So to understand the progressive movement, we need to understand cities, and we need to look at how cities developed. Well, originally, cities are going to develop around really good ports, right? You think of Boston, New York, Charleston. They were developed around trade. You need the goods to come in, and they got off the ships, and people were able to distribute them. But with the Industrial Revolution and the expansion of railroads, we're going to see cities develop more around transportation and less around trade. And the advancements in technology during this time period are going to allow cities to not only move out, but they're also going to move up. So you've got the development of the elevator and steel grids, suspension bridges, electric trolley cars, subways. So think of this as the time period when cities really sort of started becoming modern. With the elevator, think you couldn't get to the top of the Empire State Building without an elevator. So cities are really going to start growing, and of course that means more people in a smaller amount of space. And most of these people coming to these cities are going to be immigrants. Prior to the Civil War, most immigrants were coming from Northern and Western Europe. Think about the Irish and the potato famine. 1/3 of the immigrants came from Ireland. 50% of the people living in New York were Irish. But in the late 19th century, you're going to see a change, and people are going to start coming from Southern and Eastern Europe. And in the late 19th century, there's a development of a sense of nationalism, and the sense of nationalism is going to cause us to sort of shut down immigration and really start restricting immigration during the latter half of the 19th century. But we've always sort of been known as the nation of immigrants, right? That's what we've been built upon, and I'm sure you've heard the term melting pot. If you haven't, let me try to explain what the term melting pot means. Basically, it means that America wasn't already here, right? We weren't Americans, and we have this continuous culture. We were built from immigrants, right? We came from Great Britain, we came from Ireland, we came from Germany, and all these immigrants came to America, and they got squished together, and they formed a new culture. They formed the American culture. So they melted together, right? Well, there's really you can also take a different view that America really wasn't a melting pot, that we were more like a salad bowl. All of these different people came to America, but we didn't melt together. We didn't sort of integrate completely. And that can be seen most prominently in the cities, because they're going to seek out people that are like them. If you're Irish and you get off the boat, you don't go move in with Germans to help you. You move in with the other people that have come and experienced the same thing. So in cities, we're going to see the development of Little Italy, Chinatown. So people of the same group, with the same ethnicity, with the same culture and language, are all going to live together. So that goes back to the salad bowl analogy. Yes, all of the things go into the same pot, right? They all the pieces for a salad go into the bowl, but they don't get melted together. The tomatoes stay the tomatoes, and the cucumbers stay the cucumbers, even though they're all in the same bowl. Even so, even though all these immigrants are in America, they're going to remain separate. So, with the growth of cities, cities are not going to be a pleasant place. They're full of poverty, there's a lot of slums, and this is the time before the government got involved with welfare and regulation of businesses. So there is no welfare. If you come to America and you don't have any money, there's no help from the government. So you turn to people, you turn to your Irish neighbor. There's no minimum wage, there's no labor laws. So these cities were not a pretty place to live. These pictures are taken by a muckraker journalist named John Rhee, and he really wanted to focus on how immigrants were living in these inner cities. And you can see from this picture, you've got whole entire families living in very small places in abject poverty. So these immigrants living in these ethnic neighborhoods, helping each other find jobs, is going to have an effect on the city politics because people tend to vote for people they know and the people that helped them. So voting for the people who helped them is going to lead to something which is called the political machine. So think of a political machine as like a regular machine. Think of a machine turning out massive amounts of a product, shoes, clothing, etc. So a political machine could do the same thing. A political machine could turn out votes. So the way it works is, let's say you want to be elected mayor or a town councilman, and you need the people to vote for you. So you're going to go to Chinatown, and you're going to meet with the local boss of Chinatown, and you're going to promise him, the local boss, jobs, right? You'll say, well, if you elect me, I will make sure that this company hires people from Chinatown. So the boss, knowing that he can give these people jobs, all of them are going to vote for who he says. Because the boss helps these newly arrived immigrants, they vote for who the boss tells them to, thus turning out votes like a machine. And this is, of course, going to lead to corruption, right? But the local bosses are going to take kickbacks, the politicians are going to take bribes. It's going to be a mess. The most famous example of machine politics was New York's Boss Tweed. This Boss Tweed actually is what the movie Gangs of New York with Leonardo DiCaprio, it's what that movie is loosely based off of. And he was known to be in control of the voting booths or the voting areas, and he would have people, it was said, put on a mustache, come in and vote, go out, take the mustache off, and come back and vote again. So he was really corrupt, but he can control the votes. But as cities are growing, overcrowding is still a problem. There's housing problems, there's sanitation problems, there's issues with transportation, there's problems with water and crime and fire. So they see that this machine politics and the areas being ruled by bosses is not exactly working. So the progressive movement is developed to help sort of solve some of these problems, right? The middle class are going to look at, well, what can we do to stop this corruption? And they're going to think, well, the government should also help. The government needs to step in and provide and sort of help these people get out of this poverty so that it's not an endless cycle. So that if you're born in Little Italy, working in a factory, the kid who has no education ends up back in the factory with more kids, that it doesn't become an endless cycle of poverty. And the people, or the who sort of exposed this need for progress or social progress and the need to help people, were a group of people called muckrakers. And the muckrakers are journalists, and it comes from this term from Pilgrim's Progress. There's a character in Pilgrim's Progress who is so busy looking down at the muck on the ground and mucking away the rake that he misses something. I can't remember what he misses, but he doesn't get it. So they're civic-minded journalists, and they want to improve the lives of the people, and they're going to expose corruption through newspapers or print of some kind. And you need to be familiar with some of the more famous muckrakers. Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle, and she's going to go into meat packing factories and look at the horrible conditions that the people were working in. She's going to describe the way that the meat is being produced and how unsanitary it is. She's going to look at there being like maggots in the food, and of course they're being done by people who haven't slept because they're being overworked. And it's just disgusting. Like, she describes the conditions of like blood on the floor and stuff, and she does that in her book In the Jungle. Ida Tarbell, she's going to criticize Standard Oil and John D. Rockefeller. She was the daughter of a man who was actually put out of business by Rockefeller. Because remember, Rockefeller would go in and he would sort of gobble up these smaller companies, right? He might have a politician in his corner and they could push people out, and so she's going to write about the unfair business practices of Standard Oil, sort of exposing that, big companies, and his especially, coming in and putting smaller companies out of business. Jacob Ree, he's the photographer. I used a lot of his pictures, the ones of the children in the poor houses, and he's going to take pictures of New York's inner cities, and he's going to show how people really live. And of course, photography was a great way to sort of put it in people's faces, right? You can write about it, but you show them an image, and it really brings it home what these people were living, or how these people were living. So we want to move away from the poor in inner cities and look at women, because women are also a group that's going to be trying to gain equal footing and is going to be an advocate for progress. During the Progressive Era, women are going to continue their quest for suffrage, and remember that suffrage is the right to vote. This, of course, started way before with the Civil War with the Seneca Falls Convention, and they're going to continue their quest for the right to vote and equal rights, that they should be allowed to attend the same schools as men, get the same jobs as men, receive the same pay as men, because remember, they don't. So the National Women's Party is going to come together, and it's going to be led by a feminist named Alice Paul. And she's going to lead marches, she's going to get in prison, she'll go on hunger strikes, and it's because of her activism that the 19th Amendment is going to get passed. She did want, of course, an Equal Rights Amendment passed, stating that women were equal to men. That's not going to happen, but she is capable of pushing through the 19th Amendment, which gives women the right to vote, which was huge progress. Jane Addams is another another woman you should know from this time period, and she's going to advocate for child labor laws. She's really involved in limiting the hours of how much children can work, protecting children, and because of her activism, she's going to get the Child Labor Act passed, and she's sort of considered the founder of social work. So who are the progressive presidents? The progressive movement, of course, started slowly, but it is going to eventually reach the White House, and that's how you're going to get these amendments passed, like the 19th Amendment, allowing women to equal rights to vote, and the labor laws. And the first one we're going to look at is Teddy Roosevelt. And Teddy Roosevelt is going to be the first president to take the side of the worker over business. Remember, we see a lot of, before Teddy Roosevelt, presidents taking the side of business, not breaking up trusts, not enforcing the Sherman antitrust law, and sort of taking on that attitude of laissez-faire government, the government doesn't get involved. But Teddy Roosevelt's going to take a different approach, and he's going to sort of take the side of labor. He's going to start enforcing the Sherman antitrust law. He's going to become known as the trust buster, breaking up those big companies. He's going to pass the Pure Food and Drug Act. This, of course, is going to protect this consumer from harmful food. This, of course, was prompted by that muckraking journalist, Upton Sinclair, and The Jungle. So the Meat Inspection Act is also passed. Teddy Roosevelt was sort of this bigger-than-life president. He loved going outside, and he's often shown with, like, in cartoons and stuff, like carrying a gun and wrestling tigers. He's a huge outdoorsman, and so he's going to promote conservation. He's going to add national parks, that sort of thing. All right, so this is the last president we want to talk about. We're going to skip over Taft. He is considered a progressive president, but he's sort of considered a rabbit trail. So Woodrow Wilson is going to be the one that passes the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. He's going to pass the Federal Reserve Act, which opens up banking and makes it easier for individuals and private businesses to get loans. He's going to protect the 8-hour workday. He's going to get involved in workers' compensation so that if you're hurt at work, you're not just left high and dry. So Wilson definitely, you want to remember him as a progressive president. Of course, we're going to talk again about Wilson when we look at America's entrance into World War I, but you do want to remember the reforms that he did. The progressive era is going to issue in this idea that it's government's job to get involved and sort of level the playing field and make sure that everyone's receiving equal treatment and that big businesses aren't being allowed to smush the little guy. And so we see a lot more government involvement during the progressive era. The progressive era is going to sort of be put on hold, of course, when we enter into World War I, and that's sort of why we're stopping here with Woodrow Wilson.